In a stunning escalation amid stalled peace talks, Russian forces unleashed what Ukrainian officials describe as the second-largest aerial assault of the war on August 28, 2025, bombarding cities including Kyiv with over 600 drones and missiles, resulting in at least 23 deaths, including 4 children, and more than 100 injuries, while striking civilian infrastructure like residential buildings, an American-owned factory, and the British Council offices. This brazen attack has spotlighted U.S. President Donald Trump's muted response, with his administration expressing displeasure but refraining from new sanctions or condemnations, fueling debates over his approach to Vladimir Putin and the ongoing conflict. As European leaders decry the strikes as evidence of Russia's disinterest in genuine negotiations, the incident underscores the fragility of Trump's diplomatic push, raising questions about whether ceding Ukrainian territory could truly end the bloodshed or merely embolden Moscow further. With global tensions mounting, this development highlights the human cost of inaction and the urgent need for robust international pressure to avert a prolonged stalemate that could reshape Europe's security landscape. The assault began in the early hours of August 28, 2025, as Russian forces launched a massive barrage comprising 598 drones and 31 missiles across multiple Ukrainian regions, overwhelming air defenses and causing widespread destruction. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the attack as a deliberate act of terror, noting that it targeted non-military sites, including a US-based electronics factory in western Ukraine where 6 workers were injured during the night shift. The strikes also hit the offices of the British Council and the European Union in Kyiv, destroying a 5-story residential block and killing civilians, including children, in what Zelensky called a clear signal that Putin is sabotaging peace efforts. Ukraine's Air Force reported intercepting many of the incoming threats, but the sheer volume, described as the largest since the war's early days in 2022, inflicted significant damage on energy infrastructure and civilian areas, leaving parts of the capital in flames and prompting emergency evacuations. President Trump's reaction has drawn sharp scrutiny for its restraint, with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stating that Trump was not happy about the strikes but not surprised, attributing the escalation partly to Ukraine's recent drone attacks on Russian oil refineries. This subdued tone contrasts with the outrage from European allies, who view the assault as proof that Putin is uninterested in the peace negotiations Trump has been championing since his second term began. Just weeks earlier, on August 15, Trump met Putin in Alaska for high-stakes talks aimed at ending the war, where the U.S. president floated ideas like territorial concessions from Ukraine in exchange for peace, a proposal Kyiv has staunchly opposed as tantamount to capitulation. Despite Trump's optimism post-summit, including suggestions of a trilateral meeting with Zelensky, Russian officials have since backtracked, ruling out European troops in Ukraine and insisting on veto power over any security guarantees for Kyiv. European leaders have been vocal in their condemnation, using the attack to urge Trump to ramp up pressure on Moscow. French President Emmanuel Macron described the barrage as Russia's idea of peace, while German Chancellor Friedrich Merz dismissed the prospects of a Putin-Zelensky summit, stating it was obviously not going to come to a meeting. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer accused Putin of killing children and civilians and sabotaging hope of peace, and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen emphasized that Europe's safety hinges on securing Ukraine's eastern border. In response to the strikes, France and Germany pledged additional air defenses to Ukraine, signaling a potential shift toward more independent European support amid perceived U.S. hesitancy. 43 analysts suggest these leaders are appealing to Trump's aversion to prolonged casualties, hoping to sway him toward stronger measures like secondary sanctions on Russia's oil buyers, such as China and India. The attack comes at a precarious moment in Trump's diplomacy, with his envoy Steve Witkoff engaging in shuttle talks between Moscow and Kyiv. Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, met Witkoff in Washington on August 28, reiterating Ukraine's readiness for direct negotiations but accusing Russia of stalling. 39 sources close to the Ukrainian president indicate that a bilateral Putin-Zelensky meeting is impossible without U.S. pressure on Moscow, as Putin appears to be dragging out hostilities to strengthen his battlefield position. 43 critics, including prominent authors and analysts, argue that Trump's approach has inadvertently given Putin everything he can possibly want, allowing Russia to continue advances in eastern Ukraine while facing minimal repercussions. 39 Russia controls nearly one-fifth of Ukrainian territory and has gained over 1,400 square kilometers in recent months, bolstering Putin's leverage in any talks. 41. Public discourse on platforms like X reflects growing frustration with Trump's stance, with users accusing him of weakness toward Putin and labeling him a Russian asset for his silence on the assault. 19. One post highlighted the irony of Trump imposing tariffs on Iran but remaining completely silent on Russia's attacks on civilians. 20 others pointed to historical patterns, noting Putin's aggression under previous U.S. administrations and questioning Trump's affinity for the Russian leader. 29. Meanwhile, discussions in Europe include potential post-war solutions like a buffer zone between frontlines or NATO-inspired security guarantees without full alliance membership for Ukraine, though Russia has vetoed foreign military involvement. 39. As the dust settles from the August 28 barrage, the assault has not only inflicted immediate devastation but also exposed fissures in the transatlantic alliance. Trump's reluctance to escalate pressure, despite threats of 100% tariffs on Russian goods, contrasts with Europe's calls for decisive action, including more weapons for Ukraine like air-launched cruise missiles potentially worth $611 million. 39. Zelensky has urged allies to wait until early September for signs of Russian readiness for talks, but with Putin's demands remaining maximalist, insisting on recognition of occupied territories and Ukraine's demilitarization, the path to peace appears fraught. 44. Experts warn that without a unified front, the war could drag on, costing more lives and risking broader instability, as Russia's economy weathers sanctions and its military maintains momentum on the ground. 41. The coming days may test whether this attack galvanizes a stronger U.S. response or further entrenches the current impasse. To fully grasp the gravity of this latest escalation, it's essential to delve into the historical context of the Russo-Ukrainian War, which has roots stretching back over a decade and reflects long-standing tensions over identity, territory, and influence. The conflict formally ignited in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea following the Euromaidan Revolution in Ukraine, a popular uprising that ousted pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych amid protests against his decision to suspend a trade agreement with the European Union in favor of closer ties with Moscow. 84. This annexation, widely condemned internationally as illegal, was followed by Russian-backed separatist movements in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region, where proxy forces established self-proclaimed republics in Donetsk and Luhansk, leading to a low-intensity war that claimed over 14,000 lives by 2022. 85. Russia's actions were framed by Putin as protecting ethnic Russians and countering NATO expansion, but critics argue it was a calculated effort to destabilize Ukraine and prevent its pivot toward the West, drawing on historical narratives of a shared Slavic heritage that Putin has invoked to justify aggression. 86. The Minsk Agreements of 2014 and 2015, brokered by France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine, aimed to establish ceasefires and political settlements but repeatedly failed due to mutual accusations of non-compliance, with Russia denying direct involvement despite evidence of troop and weapon support for separatists. 87. These early phases set the stage for the full-scale invasion on February 24, 2022, when Russian forces launched a multi-pronged assault, citing denazification and demilitarization as pretexts, though the move was seen globally as an unprovoked act of territorial expansionism. 88. The war's escalation has been marked by periodic surges in intensity, such as the 2022 battles for Kyiv and Mariupol, where Russian sieges led to humanitarian crises, and later offensives in Bakhmut and Avdiivka, characterized by attritional warfare reminiscent of World War I trenches. 89. Aerial bombardments, like the one on August 28, 2025, echo earlier massive strikes, including the August 26, 2024, assault that involved over 200 missiles and drones targeting energy infrastructure, causing widespread blackouts and civilian casualties. 46. These patterns reveal Russia's strategy of hybrid warfare, blending conventional military force with disinformation, cyber attacks, and economic coercion to erode Ukrainian resilience and international support. 90. The conflict's deeper origins trace to the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, when Ukraine declared independence, inheriting a complex legacy of Russification policies under Tsarist and communist rule that suppressed Ukrainian language and culture. 91. Putin's 2021 essay, on the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians, underscored his view that Ukrainians are not a distinct nation, a narrative used to rationalize intervention, but historians counter that Ukraine's identity predates Russian imperialism, with roots in the Kievan Rus state of the 9th–13th centuries. 98 This ideological clash has fueled escalations, from the 2014 downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 over Donbass, attributed to Russian-supplied missiles, to ongoing atrocities like the Bucha massacre in 2022, where retreating Russian forces left evidence of war crimes. 92 The war's trajectory has also been shaped by global dynamics, including NATO's eastward expansion post-Cold War, which Russia perceives as encirclement, though alliances argue it was a response to Eastern European nations' sovereign choices for security. 93 Recent escalations, such as Ukraine's 2024 incursion into Russia's Kursk region, have introduced new variables, prompting retaliatory strikes like the August 28 barrage and highlighting the risks of spillover beyond Ukraine's borders. 94. The implications of U.S. policy toward Ukraine under President Trump are profound, potentially reshaping not only the conflict's outcome but also America's global standing and alliances. Trump's administration has marked a departure from the Biden era's robust military aid, emphasizing negotiation over escalation, as evidenced by the Alaska summit and proposals for territorial concessions. 99 While Trump has approved arms deals, such as the $825 million package for extended-range missiles funded partly by European allies, his overall approach prioritizes ending the war swiftly, even if it means pressuring Kyiv to cede land, a stance critics fear could reward aggression and encourage similar moves by adversaries like China in Taiwan. 100 This transactional style, rooted in Trump's first term where he withheld aid to Ukraine amid impeachment scandals, has led to incoherence in policy, damaging U.S. credibility and straining NATO unity. 102 Analysts warn that reducing support could prolong the war by emboldening Putin, who interprets restraint as weakness, potentially leading to more escalations like the recent attack. 103 A shift toward concessions might fracture transatlantic relations, with Europe stepping up independently, as seen in pledges for air defenses, but lacking U.S. leadership could undermine deterrence against Russia. 104 Trump's evolving rhetoric, from blaming Ukraine for the war to expressing concern over escalations, suggests internal tensions, but his frustration with stalled talks hints at possible deeper involvement or, conversely, withdrawal. 105 Economically, U.S. policy under Trump could target Russia's enablers through secondary sanctions on oil buyers like China and India, but hesitation risks sustaining Moscow's war economy. 106 Broader ramifications include a potential Trump doctrine, favoring bilateral deals over multilateral commitments, which might weaken alliances in the Asia-Pacific and encourage authoritarian regimes. 112 If Trump pushes for a quick deal, it could doom Ukraine to partition, eroding post-World War II norms against territorial conquest, while sustained aid, despite depletion fears, might flow through existing pipelines, bolstering Kyiv's defenses. 107 Ultimately, Trump's policy could either force a fragile peace or extend the conflict, with global security hanging in the balance. European reactions to the August 28 attack have been swift and unified, underscoring a growing divergence from U.S. caution. Defense ministers from across the continent convened in Copenhagen to pledge increased pressure on Russia, condemning the strikes as barbaric and vowing to enhance Ukraine's capabilities independently if needed. 65 The EU accused Putin of undermining peace talks, labeling intentional civilian attacks as war crimes and reinforcing determination to support Kyiv. 66 Outrage peaked over damage to EU buildings in Kyiv, prompting summons of Russian diplomats by the UK and others, highlighting the assault's symbolic strike at European interests. 68 Leaders like Macron and von der Leyen have framed the incident as a test for transatlantic solidarity, urging secondary sanctions and exploring buffer zones or reassurance forces for post-war stability. 75 This proactive stance contrasts with Trump's silence, potentially leading to a more autonomous European defense posture amid fears of U.S. disengagement. On social media, particularly X, the discourse has amplified frustrations, with users decrying Trump's inaction as complicity. Posts label him a Russian asset, questioning why he bullies Iran but ignores Putin's civilian attacks, echoing historical critiques of his Putin affinity. 20 others highlight Ukraine's strikes on Russian assets, like pipelines, as justified retaliation, while media silence in some regions is attributed to pro-war pressures. 23 broader discussions tie the assault to Trump's summits, accusing him of secret deals that embolden Moscow. 34. The economic toll of the attack exacerbates Ukraine's woes, with energy grid damage causing blackouts and disrupting industries, while Russia's oil-dependent economy endures despite sanctions, thanks to buyers like China. 46. Militarily, the barrage overwhelmed defenses, downing many threats but exposing vulnerabilities, with calls for advanced systems like IRAM missiles. 15. Future scenarios range from intensified diplomacy to prolonged stalemate, hinging on whether Trump escalates or concedes, potentially reshaping global order.